Welcome to Archaeological Site Baseline Training. The purpose of taking this training is so you'll be able to gather data to create a plan for continued monitoring of archaeological sites. What is a baseline? A baseline is a thorough documentation of the current access information and condition of the site. Today we're going to go over an introduction to terminology, site records, preparing for field work, and what to do in the field. This training is best followed up by an in-field training to apply these new skills. Terminology. First, what is a site? A site is when two or more artifacts or features are spaced no more than 30 meters apart. That's according to the Bureau of Land Management. Essentially, it's a location where activities were conducted and artifacts were left behind. A feature is a type of material remain that cannot be removed from a site. For example, a roasting pit, a fire hearth, house floors, or, as in this picture, a rock shelter. A structure is a building or other constructed resource, such as bridges, corrals, or kilns. While a structure is a feature, we record them differently. And an artifact is any portable object that shows evidence of human manufacture, modification, or use. For example, implements made of stone, bone, pottery, or other durable material. When we go out to baseline a site, we start with a site record. This is usually in the form of an IMAX or Intermountain Antiquities Computer System form. It's a standardized form that's used by federal archaeologists to record historic and prehistoric archaeological sites. These forms come in three sections. There's Part A, which is the administrative data and general site information, and then Part B is filled out if it's a prehistoric site, and Part C is filled out if it's a historic site, or both are filled out if it's a multi-component site. A few of the key areas to look in on this form so that you can go back out and relocate the site and gather the baseline information is the site number, or the trinomial. This is a unique identifier for the site. Then there's site class, which talks about if it's prehistoric or historic. The site type, which is a brief description of the site. The UTM grid, or really we're looking for the coordinates of the site so that we can put it in a GPS and relocate it. And then location, this is the written out driving and access directions. Then the site description, what is it we're going to find when we get there? And the survey date, how long has it been since somebody's been out there? In the Part B section, this would be a prehistoric site, we want to look and see if there was a collection method, because sometimes there's a site record, but there's no artifacts left because all of the material was collected. You'll also look for the summary of artifacts and debris to give you a better idea of what you're going to be looking for, and if there's any non-architectural features. The same goes for Part C, which again is just the form filled out when there's a historic component to the site. Was the material collected? So you're going to look for that. What kind of artifacts and debris? And what kind of buildings and structures are you looking for? Most good site records, or IMAX forms, come with a location map and a site map. The site map is a more detailed version of the map that shows you where artifacts and features are located. So some common problems with IMAX or site records is the information is not up to date or it's insufficient, and the location information may not have given the necessary grid system that was used, so you could be off by up to like 200 meters. So we really want to double check all that information as close as possible. So what you can do is before you go, when you're in the office, you can get on Google Earth or Google Maps and follow the directions that were written out and see where it takes you. Does it make sense? That's a big question. Narrow it in even more. See if it's likely that your site's going to be located in the vicinity of where those directions took you. And then get up close ideas of what the vegetation's going to be like, where your parking access would be, and that kind of thing. So you can use other tools to verify directions. You don't have to use Google Earth. You can look at topographic maps. You can search for what it is you're looking for on the internet. So sometimes if your site has a name, people have put that on Google Earth or Google Maps. And then you also want to look at some photos of the area so you know what you're going to be hiking through and driving through. Again, one of the biggest challenges is relocating the site. A lot of times it's been decades since the last site visit, and the landscape can change, and our technology, like our GPS and other navigation, changes as well. The image at the bottom left was the site one year, and then the image to the right was the next year. So that whole canyon filled in, and it did that because there was a large flooding event. So if the site hasn't been visited for 30 years and you go there and you see the image on the right, you're in the right location. You just may not see what the site is because it's buried. So in order to have a good experience and to be accurate and able to relocate everything, it's really important that you use a GPS and take photographs. So we use a GPS to help find the site, to note where things are at the site, and to help the archaeologists relocate the sites and features that you're describing and photographing. So we're going to talk about location systems, the functions of a GPS, how to set up your GPS, and then practice using your GPS to find a point and take a point. So if you have a site record, like an IMAX form, they're going to include the UTMs. It'll say UTM grid. So latitude and longitude is what you learned about in school. It's based on the globe being a sphere, and we calculate latitude in degrees from north to south and longitude in degrees from east to west. And these are broken up into degrees, minutes, and seconds. 1 degree equals 60 minutes, 1 minute, 60 seconds, and so on. So for example, that is 122 degrees, 7 minutes, 30 seconds west, and 40 degrees, 22 minutes, 30 seconds north. And so you would plot yourself on a map using that. What UTMs have done is they have taken degrees of longitude and latitude and flattened it out. So they created a grid system that runs numerically from east to west and alphabetically from south to north. So southern Nevada is in 11S, and northern Nevada, parts of it are in 11T. And so what happens is when you break it down into that zone, which is 11S, you can kind of sink a battleship by using it. So the 0 for easting occurs on the line for the number 11, and then the northing begins at the equator. And it's all measured in meters. So here's a graphic. It's not really accurate because we don't know what grid zone it is, but it's the same concept. So City Hall is 374,015 meters north and 333,831 meters east from the 0 reference. So in your kit, you're provided, or in the printout, you're provided an example map. So what you can do is look, and there are grid numbers on the outside of your map. The bottom right corner of your map tells you you're in zone 11S, so we're in southern Nevada. And if you want to, you can locate these, or you can tell us the UTMs or the coordinates based on just roughly using this map. So if you look at point A, it's located approximately 719,800 meters east of where the 11S grid zone is. And it's located 4,166,500 meters north of the equator. So go ahead and check point B and see if you match. And these are give or take a couple hundred meters because our scale of our map doesn't make it to where we can be too accurate. And then practice with points C and D. Okay, and here are points C and D. So you want to make sure you're fairly close to these numbers, and if you don't understand, you might need to go back to earlier in the video and see how the lines on the outside of the map, those numbers, correspond to how many meters east or north one is. But of course, there's one more thing. The UTM grid zone that was laid out over the Earth, the first version of it was created in 1927, and it's called NAD 27, North American Datum. And then it was also then remapped in 1983. So a lot changed in that time period. So when your map is in NAD 27, it's a little older than if it's in NAD 83. But if you look in the blue box on the screen, those are the exact same point, but in a different grid system. So when you're in NAD 83, you're almost 200 meters further north than you are when you're in NAD 27. So you just want to make sure that your coordinates that you're writing down are matching the grid system that's being used on your map or when we get to it in your GPS. Now, a lot of cell phones and other devices use what's called WGS 84. And that was recorded in 1984, and it's very similar to North American Datum 83. So when your map or your GPS has WGS 84 or NAD 83, they're very, very similar. Okay, so what your GPS does is it locates you on a map, and it does that through triangulating your location with satellites. So to triangulate, you need a minimum of 3 satellites in order to have any form of accuracy. But the more satellites that you have, the more accurate your GPS is going to be. But there are a lot of different satellite blockers. For example, if you're driving around in your car, you're not going to be very accurate. If you are in between tall buildings, near power lines, and especially in the desert, if you're in a slot canyon, what's happening is those satellite signals are bouncing back and forth off those stone walls to get to your GPS and back out. So first, what you're going to want to do is turn on your GPS. There's a button on the side. And you're going to go in and find your satellite screen. And each GPS, we're using Garmin GPSs in this presentation. And each GPS has a satellite screen. It may look a little different, but it will be functioning the same way. It's going to show you which satellites it's able to connect with and the strength of those satellite signals. Okay, then what you're going to want to do is go in and find your position format function. Usually this is in your setup menu. And you're going to want to set your GPS to the position format of UTM UPS. So you just touch where it says position format, it will give you a menu and you select that. Next, you're going to go down and set your unit to match your map, which in this case is NAD 83. So you hit the second line, find NAD 83 and click it. Your map spheroid automatically generates. This is based on where you're located, so don't try and change that, it won't let you. Next, what you're going to do is enter a location. So you have your site that you want to go to or a point you want to go to. And so what you do is you hit the mark button on the side of your GPS. It's the one that isn't the power button, but it says mark, or you have a button on the front of your GPS that says mark. What happens is it'll come up with the screen on the top right where it tells you waypoint marked. Okay, so this is taking a point at your current location, which if you're inside, it's not talking to your satellites and it's confused, but if you're outside, you'll get a more accurate reading. So then that's not where you want to go because you're already there. You want to move your cursor or point your finger to the location field and change the numbers as needed. And then you can also change the name of the point. So enter the position location on the photo, the bottom right photo, and save it as test. You can use the arrows to move back and forth and right over. Okay, whenever you're going to enter waypoints, you want to make sure that your GPS is in the correct NAD and that you double checked what you entered for errors. So buttons don't always do what they're told. So now that you've saved that waypoint as test in your GPS, you have to relocate it in your device. And all your waypoints are stored in a waypoint manager. It has a little icon. Once you click on that, you'll see a list of waypoints, or maybe you'll just see test. It depends on if you've used your GPS before or not. So now what I want you to do is click on the test waypoint. On the slide here it says waypoint 1, but click on test, then view map, and then hit go. If you're indoors, your GPS might be very confused and not know where it's supposed to be pointing you. But what you can do is pause this video, go outside, look at your GPS, make sure you have 3 satellites, and when you hit go, you want to see that it's pointing toward the north central part of Las Vegas. Okay, well, I hope that worked for you. And if it didn't, you got to make sure that you're outside, that you have 3 satellites, that all of your numbers that you entered in for your waypoint match. And if they don't, go ahead and change that and try again. So now that you know how to find a waypoint, how do you take waypoints? So again, you want to make sure you have at least 3 satellites. You want to write down what position format you're in. So you want to jot down that you are in NAD 83. And then go outside, find some locations, hit the mark button on the side of your device. We always recommend that you write down the point if you're doing this for work, but for practice you don't have to. You can rename it if you want. Make sure you save that point or it'll get erased. Okay, so usually if we're in a classroom setting, we go and we do some outdoor practice. Again, if you went out and paused the video and took 3 different location points and saved them, I recommend going out and relocating all of those. You'll be able to see how accurate the GPS is, what it's like to follow an arrow on a map, the fact that it takes you moving for the satellites to figure out exactly where you are and then get a lock on you and point you in the right direction. And it's always important to make sure you don't just look at the GPS, that you look at the ground and you look at what's in front of you. The GPS won't tell you which path to take. Instead, it's giving you a bird's eye direction. So if you were to fly from point A to point B, this is the way you do it. But there are going to be obstacles in your way. So some pointers: always bring extra batteries. Make sure if you have a new GPS that it's calibrated. Check for satellite signals. Always double check the format position to make sure it matches what you're doing. Always take a point where your car is parked so you can find your way back. And look at the ground and terrain, not just at the GPS. When practicing, don't be afraid to push buttons and get familiar before going out. All right, so the next section is on GPS and photography. There are different types of photos that we would like you to take. Approach photos, especially if this is a site that hasn't been visited in many years. A lot of times the roads and terrain changes. Contextual photos, those are photos that show the features and the landscape around and in the site. Overview photos, which show the features or again, the areas a little closer up. And feature photos, where you get the actual feature in the photograph. If you have a large rock art site, for example, or rock writing site, you would take photos along, for example, the rock wall to make sure you get every feature in the photo, but you don't need to take close-up photos of every glyph on the rocks. It's always a good idea to demonstrate relative size by putting down a scale or having somebody stand in the photo. Especially when taking artifact photos, if you don't have a card like this, you can put down a quarter or another thing that you have available. And again, I talked about photographing large sites. It's okay to take a lot of photos. This is what we're going to use to see if impacts are new or old. So it's important that we get a lot of those photos to cover everything you can. And the photos you take of the sites belong to state parks, and they can't be used on the internet or sold without written permission. This is to ensure that while you're documenting sites, that you're not going to be taking any of those photos, putting them on social media, or letting that information out. So to record your photos and your GPS points, we have a photo and GPS log. And we're going to, on the top, put in the site number or trinomial, the date that we went out, and who's recording. Then we can use the lines to put in photos and GPS location information. For example, photos 315 through 316 were of the parking, and it was the view of the parking area from the hillside on the east, and the camera was facing west. And then when they hit the mark button on the GPS, the point number showed up as number 12, and then they wrote down the coordinates in case their GPS malfunctions. So that first number is the easting, and the second number is the northing. So say they continue on and they take another photograph, photo number 317, and it's of the trail. And it's the view of the trail to the north of the parking area. And so the photograph is taken north, but they didn't get a new GPS coordinate because it's the same or really close to the parking coordinate. So you don't have to have a GPS point for every photo, and you don't have to have a photo for every GPS point. Here's an example of that GPS point without the photo. They're just marking the end of the maintained trail When they hit their GPS, it was number 13, and that is the easting and northing. So when you go out to baseline a site, or even if you're just monitoring, it's always a good idea to have your GPS with the points preloaded, a camera, a compass so you know which direction of view you're facing, a clipboard so you can write things down, the original site record, any maps that they had or photographs, note paper so that you can take notes, and the recording forms. Always enter the GPS points for your site and the different features you're looking for into your GPS before you leave. There's nothing more frustrating than standing out and entering in points while you're trying to hike around and relocate everything. Go out and you want to, when you're out there, verify and update what's known about the site. So we have a baseline form to complete, a photo and GPS log, and the structures form. The baseline form looks like this. The front is to capture directions, the description of the site, including artifacts that are found, the site condition, and the dimensions. So on the top of the form, you're going to fill out which state park, the site number, the date that you went out, who was out together. You're also going to mark if it's a historic or prehistoric site, or maybe it's got both, if it was previously recorded and the date, and then if you know the site location information. So a lot of times you'll have an easting and a northing put on some paperwork, but without the telling you if it's a NAD 27, which is the older version, or NAD 83. So sometimes you'll put the coordinates in both as in 27 and 83, and then when you're out there, you're going to try and figure out which one it is. So what I'd like you to do is I provided a form, and I'd like you to practice filling out the top of the form. Okay, the next step is going to be recording how to get to your site. Ultimately, the goal here is to provide a clear narrative that describes the journey traveled with photographs of any turns that aren't obvious, with GPS points and mileage readings. Now, this is especially important for sites that are remote, off unmarked dirt roads, or that require a lot of hiking to get to. If your site's just on the side of the road, you're not going to have to take that many photographs. But it would be best if you did an odometer reading from a well-known location so that people can verify they're in the right location. So what we want to happen is for you to document mileage, left turns, right turns, using north, south, east, or west. If there's exit numbers or names, street names, numbers, anything like that. If there's unmarked roads or roads that are poorly marked, please don't say take a left at the tree. We want a GPS point, some context photos, any landmarks or key features. And then once you park, again, read that odometer reading, take a GPS point, take a photograph, and describe the driving conditions to get there and any kind of vehicle requirements so that the next people know what they're getting into. If you need to hike to your site, take a photograph and note the direction you need to travel in. And while you're hiking, document any turns or complicated navigation areas. Do you have to cross a river or a creek? Anything like that. And then take GPS points and photographs at turns or landmarks. And try and be aware of the distance you traveled and describe the terrain, slope, and any major challenges to the site. So what we're going to do is have you complete directions to where you're located now from a known point of origin. So from your home, how did you get to this training class? Or how did you get from work to home or home to work? Just give a little practice. For those of you who are taking the class at Cathedral Gorge State Parks, go ahead and start your driving directions from the 319 to Panaca and the 93. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to describe the site when we get there. So the general site type, the major features or artifact concentrations, and ask ourselves, once we've gotten out there, does it match what we had in the record? So if it doesn't match, what we want you to do is provide general descriptions and be sure to take photos. For example, this is a stone tool or flake. That's a general description. An archaeologist would call it a jasper scraper, but what we're looking for is very general. It is a stone tool, a flake, a red rock that was used, whatever you can do to describe it, because that picture is really going to help us out too. All right, and if we were to visit this site, we would fill out our form and talk about artifact types. Okay, and then one of the other things we're going to look for is the condition of the site. Are there positive factors, like you found all the elements, all of the features and structures were intact, there was no trash? Are there negative factors, like there's evidence of digging in the area, you couldn't relocate artifacts, there's erosion threatening the site, or there's been structural collapse? And then how big is the site? You can sketch a site map, which this is made from a computer, so it's not expected to be this quality if you make a site map. Because all you need is a compass, paper, and a pencil. No art classes are needed. We want to make sure there's a north arrow, a legend with symbols, and the name of the artist, the date, and the site number. All right, so here's a sketch of a fictional site. It's all right, but it's missing the key, the legend here. So we need to make sure that we have that so that people can read your map. And you want to put the artifacts, features, structures, or any kind of geological or natural features. Like in this example, they put the river on there so you would know if it's north or south of the river. Okay, some sites have a datum. It's not the same as what we're talking about when we're talking about mapping on the globe. The datum instead is a reference point for archaeologists to map the site when they get back to the office. So they're going to say the pit house is so many meters to the southeast of the datum. And that just gives them relative locations. Okay, here's an example of a site map for a rock writing site. And sometimes it helps to put arrows to let us know things are located behind things or on top of things because you can't see it in the photo. Here's a really messy site map. It's got a little too much detail, but it does include features and artifacts. All right, if we were doing a practice outside, this is when we would take time to go outside and think of what the condition is and then draw a sketch map. All right, and then we're going to continue on the baseline form and fill out those conditions and dimensions. There's one extra thing that we need to document, and that's structures. We have a separate form for documenting structures because they would take up your whole baseline form if you have multiple. What you're going to want to do is take a GPS coordinate, and if you have multiple structures, you want to take that coordinate from the same place on each structure. So the northeast corner or the most defined corner are a good way to do that. And structures, you're just going to number them. So this is structure number 1. We have no name for it, and that's our site number. And then that location information is the most well-defined corner, or it is the northwest corner. We're going to look around and note the condition and the structural integrity and any features that are present. There's a little checklist. So for example, this picture shows that we have walls, right? We don't really have a floor. or doors. It's all made out of stone. It's in fairly poor condition because it's just half walls that are standing with a potential entrance. But that's kind of subject to interpretation if it's in good condition or poor condition. Just make sure you write notes. Okay? And then when it comes to describing the structure, we want to know what construction materials were used, any important features you found, missing parts, additions, associated features. This image is a nightmare for recording because the people who were living here made addition after addition after addition, and they used every possible material type from stone to like cardboard. So this is more requires more paperwork. But back to our original stone wall structure, the description can be simple. This roughly square structure is made from stacked rock with no mortar. The walls range from 3 to 4 feet in height with scattered rockfall around the walls. Inside, there is possible evidence of a hearth and window ledge. The soil is the same as that found on the exterior of the structure, and the entrance or area without any rock is on the northwest corner. And then you just draw a little sketch map of what you found. So you have a north arrow, an outline of the building, something that notes if there's windows or doors or any internal features. And that's to go along with your photos so somebody can orientate themselves. So if they have a picture of the trash scatter and a picture of the wall, they know where the trash scatter is in relationship to the structure. All right. When you're taking photos, you want to take photos from the facade or what you consider to be the front, which may not have one, and then each corner, and then the interior if it's safe, and any kind of context. And then you also want to take any condition photos. So if there's cracking or damage, demolition, missing windows, doors, whatever you can see. And then take some pictures of any internal features you might find. Also, when you're taking pictures, get those associated features photographed and drawn on your map. And do write down anything you consider to be an addition. And be prepared when you go out to baseline a site that you may not find the site. Directions that you took to get to where you think you should be need to be clear so that we know it's not there. And the photos of the area you end up at are important. So if you get there, you can't find it, I need to know where you drove, how you got there, and any photos of what the area looks like. Because we might be like these people here and match up and say, wow, the site is now under gravel, or hey, our coordinate might have been wrong and the site might be 3 ridges over. So just make sure you document what you've done. Okay. The other thing that might happen is you may find artifacts or features on the way to or from the site. We recommend that you visit your targeted site first, and then with time permitting, on your way back, take down the location information, a short description, and photos of what you found. And you can report that back to your park supervisor, and they can talk to the archaeologist to see if it's been recorded, and they can also see whose land it's on. So with this information, I hope you can read a site form, that you understand the challenges with relocating sites, that you get the idea of how to use a GPS, and hopefully some more experience on your own with that will help, and you can complete the forms that are necessary.